At 10 years old, my mom was very friendly with a very big sort of Broadway type producer in Johannesburg in theater. And this woman, Toby Kushlik, who was very, very well known, said, Grace, my mom's name was Grace, said, Grace, I have a play and I need a young daughter, a young girl to play one of the lead roles. And I'd like to speak to your daughter. So my mother was amazed. Of course, I was so excited. I auditioned. I went to see an immigration attorney. And the guy said to me, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a singer and an actress. He said, well, forget about that. We have 20,000 out-of-work singers and actresses. We don't need another one. What else do you do? I said, well, my mother always said, if I'm going to be in theater, I have to have something to fall back on. So she recommended that I do a business course and a secretarial course. So I told him that. And he said, were you any good? So I didn't know who these people were. And they kept on talking, well, Foxy would like to make an appointment. I said, okay, who's Foxy? So they picked me up. This big stretch limo shows up near Bloomingdale's. We get in the car, we go downtown. Two lovely women were there talking about Foxy. So finally, I took them through they said, it's for Foxy. He wants to make a fragrance. So by the third time, they have more blotter strips. They have more fragrances that they like on the left because I'm able to help them connect those neural pathways to really think and smell with their brain. It's because people don't even think about it.
Yeah, the brain takes up 5% of the body, of total body weight, but it can take 20% of the energy. Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NuCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to NuCalm.com, Mike15 promo code. NuCalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Sue Phillips, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and we want to talk about this amazing book, The Power of Perfume. I had no idea how much power perfume had, and I had no idea how much scents had grabbed me in my life until I read your book. I mean, anyway, thank you again for being here. It's awesome to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm so thrilled we had a little chit chat before because I learned so much about you. And I'm so excited to be here and to share my story and to share it with you and your viewers and your audience. So thank you.
I don't normally talk about myself. And we just happen to be in a moment where there's just been a lot going on. And I'm really, truly thankful to be back doing this after everything that happened. So thank you again. I appreciate you. So where were you born?
So I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Did you grow up there?
South Africa. I grew up there. I was living there. I was born. My parents were amazing. My mom was a fantastic artist, calligraphist, singer, musician, homemaker. She was the quintessential Renaissance woman. There was nothing she couldn't do. So I got my creativity from her, although I cannot draw, I cannot paint the way she did, but I'm creative in other ways. And my father was a wonderful businessman. He started his business career at 13 years old, and he landed up putting his two brothers through medical school. So he was a great guy. He could have been a fantastic lawyer, but he had to be in business because the other two were wanting to be doctors. He put them through. And I was born in Johannesburg. At 10 years old, my mom was very friendly with a very big sort of Broadway type producer in Johannesburg in theater. And this woman, Toby Kushlik, who was very, very well known, said, Grace, my mom's name was Grace, said, Grace, I have a play and I need a young daughter, a young girl to play one of the lead roles. And I'd like to speak to your daughter. So my mother was amazed. Of course, I was so excited. I auditioned, I got the part. And of course, all my friends at 10 years old in school were so upset and so jealous of me, but I loved it. Anyway, that was my first foray into theater. And through my mom, I was able to sing, and I had a great voice. She had a wonderful voice. So that got me the acting bug. And so when I left school and I graduated from high school, I went to university in Johannesburg called Witwatersrand. The literal translation is White Waters Ridge, Witwatersrand in Afrikaans. But I didn't really like that. So I decided that I wanted to leave Johannesburg to go to Cape Town. Now, in South Africa in those days, nobody left home to go to college. Unlike in America, everybody leaves home to go colleges away, and that's the norm. It was so unusual. And so my mom and dad were very upset, but the only theatrical course in Cape Town that was in Cape Town at that time. So I went to UCT, University of Cape Town. I studied acting. I got a degree in theater and acting and theater, and I loved it. And so that was sort of my foray, as I said, into theater. So then I decided that I wanted to go study in London, and I auditioned for the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA, the most well-known acting school in the world. Now, sadly, in the late 70s, South Africa was really very badly represented in terms of the political situation, and nobody wanted us. So I didn't get in. And my brother at that time was living in New York. So I decided, okay, I didn't want to go back to South Africa. I couldn't get into RADA, and I came to New York. So I came to New York for the first time for the bicentennial celebrations in 1976. Mike, America was on fire. It was wonderful. It was so exciting. It was the celebration of the 200-year anniversary of America. Everywhere there were parties, there were celebrations. I was in New York and New Orleans and Texas, and then went to San Diego and California. And I just got a wonderful feeling about the energy, the excitement, and the exuberance of America. And so a year later, I decided to emigrate here. So I went back to South Africa. My mom and dad, by this stage, were quite aware that I wanted to leave South Africa. My brother was here. And so I left. And I went to see an immigration attorney. And the guy said to me, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a singer and an actress." He said, "Well, forget about that. We have 20,000 out-of-work singers and actresses. We don't need another one. What else do you do?" I said, "Well, my mother always said, if I'm going to be in theater, I have to have something to fall back on." So she recommended that I do a business course and a secretarial course. So I told him that. And he said, "Were you any good?" And by the way he asked me the question, I knew that was my ticket to America. I said, "Yes." So he said, "Well, I will hire you. You can be my office manager." And in those days, we did, shorthand. Legal offices required people and the secretaries and the administrators to do shorthand. Nobody knows what shorthand is now. Everything is typing, and texting. So I said to him, "Well, I'll be happy to do a refresher course." I signed up for one of these Catherine Gibbs schools. 2 weeks later, I joined him, and that was how I landed up in America. He processed my green card. At the end of the year, I went on 3 job offers with a headhunter. One was to work in fashion. At the time, I didn't think I knew anything about fashion. One was then to work in a bank. I said, for sure, I'm not going to be in a bank. And the third was to work at Elizabeth Arden. And that's how I got my start in the cosmetics industry.
Wow. What a story. I love it.
And that's just the beginning.
So do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?
Of course, go ahead.
So growing up in Johannesburg, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
That's a great question. I think going to the game reserves during the holiday times, would go with my parents. And then in, I guess, standard 5, I don't know what that grade is equivalent here, but maybe grade 5 or grade 7, but it was standard 5. We went on a class field trip to the game reserves. Now, I lived in Johannesburg, which is the small sort of metropolis like New York. And the game reserve was about 200 or 300 miles away. And it was a wonderful experience to really see the animals up close. And that was just so wonderful to see the nature and the smell of the hot earth being, you know, the sun would just scorch the earth, and in the middle of at night, the earth would be cooled down by the dew and the freezing temperatures. So this confluence of really hot heat and the cold, earthy, dewy. I have those smells in my nose, and one day I'm going to make a fragrance like that, because that's what I'm going to do. But so that was a wonderful, it was a wonderful lifestyle at the time. Grow up being outdoors, going on walks, playing tennis, playing netball at school. I was on the debate team. Even despite the political situation, it was a healthy place to grow up in, which is a strange way to think about it. But there were no drugs at that time. There was very little crime. Everything changed later on, sadly. But it was, my mom and dad. My mom would have these parties every single Sunday. People would come to the house, and I remember every Sunday my grandmother would come. We would, just be with family and friends. People didn't go out to restaurants much. It was very much a home entertainment society. People entertained at home, dinner parties, social engagements. It wasn't a going out kind of town. But of course, everything was different. Now, they have the best restaurants in Johannesburg and Cape Town and so on.
That's cool. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
My mom.
Yeah.
She was, you can even take a look and you'll see her picture in the book. She was a beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, that's my mom and that's my daughter. The reason she was influential in my life is because of all the creativity, the art. I grew up in a home filled with art, and she was in her studio. She would do the beautiful calligraphy. She would do paintings. My home is filled with all her paintings. She would practice her singing. She was an opera singer. She was in La Traviata in Johannesburg at the opera. So that's how I grew up. To me, her dinner parties were just like the norm. She would make the beautiful menus in calligraphy. She would cook everything. She would bake everything. My home had the most beautiful aromas because of what she did. So, even though, as I said, I cannot draw or paint, her creativity just flowed through me. And so I grew up with scent and sound and art and music. And my dad was very influential too, but from a business standpoint. He and I were very, very close. In fact, when I left Johannesburg to go to Cape Town to drama school, he drove me down, and it was a 2-day drive, and we had the best time just chatting and talking. And I couldn't drive at the time. I was too young, but we really connected. And I always had a wonderful, wonderful relationship with my dad.
It's awesome. In high school, did you have a favorite subject?
It was always art, even though I couldn't draw. I loved art, and I loved English literature. I loved English literature, and I loved to read the parts. And, I was a drama. I went to the drama faculty, and I was in theater at school.
Mm-hmm.
They cast me in roles. So, yeah, always from the time I was a little girl, it was art, it was theater, it was literature, music, and so on.
Having been on stage as the lead in that play at 10 years old kind of paved the way for you in high school,
Well, I was always different. I was at 13 years old, I was already 5'8". All my friends were 5'2".
Mm-hmm.
And so being physically different, and then being at 10 years old in a theater, that, made me different.
Mm-hmm.
My friends were really, tiny, petite, and I was this sort of giant girl. And I was on the netball team. I was the shooter because I was the tallest. So it's really interesting you ask me these questions. In every situation, I've always been different. I was in Johannesburg, but I went to Cape Town. I was different. I came to America. I was different. I had an accent. Some people followed the path of getting married when they soon came out of school, I waited a while, but then I had two husbands after that. So I think in a way, my differences and my physical differences and the fact that I have an accent in America has made me different and has actually helped me very much in my career. And I am grateful for that.
Yeah. So in high school, did you have a favorite teacher?
Yes. I had well, there was one teacher who was really awful, Mr. Mollett. He had this very deep voice, and he would call the students friend. He'd say, "Friend, you are sleeping. You better wake up. I need to give you a test. You better wake up." But the other, we were very scared of him. My favorite teacher was actually Mr. Wilkie. He was he was just wonderful. And in fact, my best friend and I, she lives in Miami. We talked about him the other day. He was just a wonderful guy. He was I think that he taught us art and math, believe it or not, because a lot of the teachers had two different, subjects that they taught. So I didn't love math, but I loved art. So he was a very wonderful teacher.
It's cool. I love how teachers help form us. How they,
Absolutely.
they'll grab us, right?
Yes.
And grab our attention and our imagination. And I love teachers, and I actually am one now. I'm actually an adjunct professor at a local college. So yeah. So,
I've been an adjunct professor at FIT in New York City and LIM College, and I'm now going to be teaching a course in Sarasota, where I just moved to as well.
have you ever heard of FITM?
Of course, I love FITM in California. Yes.
Well, my daughter graduated from FITM.
Ah, well, I think I did a lecture there one time when I was at FIT, and they asked me to come and do a course or a talk, which I did.
Yeah.
Great school.
She loved that school, loved her education. She just raves about it, and the people there. She connected with a bunch of them.
Fantastic.
So you go to work for Elizabeth Arden. What do you do for Elizabeth Arden?
So I became the executive assistant to the president of Elizabeth Arden. When I got the job from the headhunter, and he said, the president really liked you. He liked the way you sound. Again, they liked my sound and the fact that I had a different accent. And his name was Joe Ronchetti. He was the president, a terrific guy, short, stocky, but he had a great personality, and the retailers loved him. And so I was literally his executive assistant, his executive secretary. I would come in the mornings, go through the mail. When we had retailers visiting us, like a real good girl, like my mother taught me, I offered to make coffee for all the visitors. Now, that's something that the American girls didn't want to do. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm not going to make coffee. But it was part of my background. Always you have people come to your home, you invite them, you offer them coffee. People come to the office, you invite them, you offer them coffee. So he liked that I had sort of a different social skill set. But then one day he said to me, and at night I had started my acting career as well. So at night I'd go singing and acting in some of these dives and some of these clubs, because I still wanted to keep my theatrical experience going. So I invited, and I called them all the Ardenettes, Joe and the vice president. And of course, because I was his assistant, they all came to support me. See, there was method to my madness. And Joe said to me one time, he said, Sue, you'd be great in training. I see how you are on stage and you're with people, and you'd be great in training. I said, well, what do you mean by training? He said, train the people behind the counter all about our fragrances. But he said, you'd have to go to Macy's and get your orientation. I said, me and Macy's? I said, I'm a college graduate. I don't want to go to Macy's. He said, not that I didn't think Macy's was bad, but, after everything, to go and maybe sell cosmetics behind the counter, he said to me, that'll be the best experience you ever had. And it was. It was amazing. I saw how people came to try the products. I saw how the women interacted with the clients. And it was great experience, really talking to the customer. So, you know, I apologize if anybody thinks I was too uppity for that, but I wasn't. It was just that, you know, you had a certain mindset of what you wanted to do and where you're going and what the actual job required. And he was 100% right. When I finished the 3-month orientation, I literally packed my bags and traveled for 2 years. And I realized that fragrance is all about the experience. It's all about how it makes you feel. I would see the little old ladies coming up to the counters, peeling off their dollar bills because they loved that Chloe perfume, or they wanted the Lagerfeld perfume for their husbands, and how it was a real challenge for them to pay that kind of money. And then the fancy ladies in their fur coats would just toss it down. And so I saw the difference in clients, and it really gave me a great deal of experience in how to approach people and never to judge people by what they looked like or what they felt like or what they dressed like, because you never know how somebody who might be very wealthy might not want to spend that money, or somebody who's desperate to feel good will take their savings and spend money for that beautiful perfume. So it was great to travel around America, realizing that New York is not America. I traveled pretty much to every single state, setting up the training schools. I would arrive, I would set up the training schools, and I would really create an ambiance. I would have beautiful music playing. I'd have the beautiful visuals of the brands of Chloe and Lagerfeld, and of the music playing and the fragrance spraying in the air, so that when people came to the training school, if it was in a hotel conference room, which is pretty bland, I turned it into a beautiful oasis that the people came in and they were able to breathe and absorb the brand essence of the fragrances that we were selling. And so every time I created a fragrance training, sales would go sky high because the people were so motivated by what they'd heard, what they'd learned, what they'd experienced. And so they were so motivated to run back to the counters and to experience and to explain that to their clients, to really impart some of the knowledge. So, but after 2 years of traveling pretty much 90% of the time, it was time for me to get a position. And I went to Joe and I said, Joe, I've been traveling for 2 years. I would literally get up in the morning, 6 o'clock, take an 8 o'clock flight to someplace, do a lunch, do a presentation, pack up, fly to the next event to do a cocktail party, stay over at night, the next morning leave. I would do 6 or 7 presentations a week, come back to New York, take my clothes to the dry cleaners. They would pack, clean them. I'd repack, go off the next week and go off again. And I did this for 2 years. But it was a great experience for me to learn about America, to see the different cultures. The North is very different than the South. The West is very different from the East, and so on. So it was a wonderful experience to really see the cultural differences in America. And after the 2 years, I went to Joe and I said, look, you're killing me. This traveling is killing me. I got to do something else. He said, I think you'd be great in product development. I said, for which division? He said, the beauty. So what girl doesn't like nails and lips and eyes and colors? So that was fun. I was in product development for 2 years, and it was, a great new experience. And then they promoted me to marketing director for fragrance. And that was my first love. And that was great. So that was Elizabeth Arden, 6 years at Arden. And then I finally, one night, I went to one of these black tie industry functions, and I met the president of Lancome. And they had a very tiny little fragrance division. Their big business was cosmetics and treatment, and their fragrance was a tiny percentage of the total business. And I met the president. He said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm the marketing director for fragrance. He said, well, come in and see me. So we made an appointment. I went to see him the next week, and he hired me as marketing director for fragrance and men's skincare. Now I had to go back to Joe and tell him that his little protege was leaving. And I said to him, Joe, I love Elizabeth Arden. I love being here. It's been amazing, but I will always be remembered as your secretary. And in order for me to really be considered more of an industry professional, I need to go. And he understood, but he was very upset.
Yeah.
And that was, my next trajectory. I was at Lancôme for 4 years, worked on this little tiny brand called Magie Noire, which was created in about 1920. It was a very deep, earthy, mossy, patchouli kind of fragrance, very European, not really American, because it was created in Europe for Lancôme. And then I worked on a men's skincare product called Programme Homme. It was the first skincare for men that Lancôme had ever created. And it was sold at the women's counters. So it was a bit of a stretch for men to go to the women's counters in the stores to try on men's skincare. Anyway, ultimately, and then I worked on the new fragrance, which was called Trésor, which was represented by Julia Roberts. And then the most amazing thing happened to me, Mike. I got a call from a headhunter whose name was Frank Shields. I'm sure you've heard of Brooke Shields. Brooke Shields' father was a headhunter. And I went to see him, and it was to be vice president of Tiffany. And if you'd have told me growing up in South Africa that one day I'd be invited to be, to interview for vice president of Tiffany, and I did, and I got the job. And it was an amazing, I mean, what a career path. And I'd never studied marketing. I'd never studied perfumery. I learned everything that I did on the job, which is just as well, I think, as having the education. But honestly, it was, I mean, what an iconic brand. It was 150 years of Tiffany, and this was going to be the launch of their first iconic Tiffany fragrance. And I created and launched that we actually created a joint venture with Chanel, because Tiffany and Chanel, when Tiffany started this project, they didn't really know anything about fragrance. They were the jewelry company. And that's why they needed to find somebody in the fragrance area. And I got the job. And we actually, after I started, Chanel and Tiffany inked a joint venture because they wanted quality, prestige, luxury. And Chanel and Tiffany were two very iconic brands that would be able to create a beautiful fragrance. And I worked with the chief perfumer to create the fragrance. And basically along the way, I changed direction of it, and we launched a beautifully successful fragrance.
That's
Tiffany.
Awesome. That's awesome. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
When you were traveling around the country for Arden, and you were gone for 2 years, and you were doing these trainings, you said you would set up this sort of multi-sensory experience, right? Where you used lighting, you used artwork, you used graphics, you used scents, all that kind of thing.
Right.
Where do you think that came from?
I know exactly where it came from. It came from my mother, and I'm very, of course. And
that was exactly where I was headed, because I'm literally listening to you and I'm thinking about your mom, right? And the impact that she had on your life. She was a big, big influence, and still is today. Still to this day, she's a massive influence.
I'm tearing up. I'm tearing up.
I know. And I'm not trying to make you cry, but I just think
tears of joy.
I just think your mother was such a special person, and really, honestly, a powerhouse. And especially in your life, her influence in your life is literally just amazing. And I feel like I just felt like it was something we should talk about, because I see that. I see her influence in what you're doing to succeed, right?
Yeah.
And I'd be willing to bet you that has been a running theme for decades, where mom's influence has been a big, big part of what's made you successful. And I think it started with the fact that she had this idea for you. She had this she had this she taught you that being different was okay, that rising above was what you needed to do, right? I mean, even as little as even something as minor, and I don't think it's minor, but even something people would look at as minor, as you made coffee when other people wouldn't make coffee. I'm telling you, Sue, if your episode 350, I told you this. We have 300 plus, 340 plus life stories on our podcast. And what we find is the people who have accomplished at a very high level are willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do. They're willing to do things that other people think that's below me, or that's not something I would do, or those types of things, right? They work for free. They find opportunity in places where you don't normally find opportunity. Okay. And I feel like that's your entire life story, is from the time you were a little girl and your mom had this influence on you. I mean, she led by example, but she also taught you a great deal too, and prepared you for life. And man, I think so much more of your mother now than I did 30 minutes ago. It's not even funny. I'm a huge admirer of your mother. So,
her name was Grace.
yeah.
She was so graceful. She was so elegant. She was a beautiful woman. And, that's another thing that she taught me.
Mm-hmm.
I will never forget, I was, I don't know, 16, 17, and it was the height of, or maybe younger, whatever. It was the height of the hippies and the short skirts and all of that. And, I wanted to have a short skirt, a mini skirt. And she said to me, "You cannot go out the house like that."
Mm-hmm.
She said, "I won't." And we fought for 2 inches. It's, I wanted higher, she wanted it lower. And it's interesting because I wanted to be like all my friends,
Mm-hmm.
5'2" and hip, mini little skirts. And she saw in me that I was different, that I was tall, and wearing, short skirts like that would have been silly for me, and it would have put me in a difficult situation. So even for 2 inches or 4 inches, she was right. And today I get dressed, and even if I'm in jeans, people say, "Sue, you're so elegant." It's my mother through and through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you got to think about this for a second. She stood her ground, right?
Yeah.
On what she believed was important in the formation of you to prepare you for life.
Right.
I mean, my goodness, I'm such a huge fan of your mother. It's not even funny. I admire her. I really do.
I'm going to send you something of hers, which I think you would love. And you can tell me what it is. She did calligraphy, and I have a couple of beautiful pieces of hers that I had printed. One was the Herbal Abecedarium, which is this one. If you look at the book, take a look at the book on page. Let's see, page. These are not. 157, 158, 159, 160. You'll see a picture of me and my mom, me at 10, and her beautiful magnolias. This is my mom.
I'm looking at it, yeah.
And then this is the Herbal Abecedarian. She did this. You might be able to show it better on your screen.
Yeah.
But anyway, where she took every letter of the alphabet, and she did a herb or a spice. Anyway,
not quite showing.
Almost.
But it's on. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yes, there it is. And the magnolias.
That is just gorgeous.
So
yeah, she is just. I mean, look at her. She's just a powerhouse, and she's beautiful. I really admire your mother.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
I mean, you have to think about this for a second. I mean, I'm one of the things that happened here is we started this podcast, I told you, a little over 2 years ago. We've become a parenting podcast because we talk about parents all the time. We talk about the importance of parenting and how important it is that parents don't abdicate their responsibility as a parent, right? When I see people like your mom who did such an amazing job raising you and preparing you to go out into this big, beautiful world and contribute to it,
Yeah.
I just think the world of her. I couldn't be prouder of her if I tried. We're going to take a real quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this amazing book, and I mean amazing book, The Power of Perfume. When I received this book, I thought, there's power to perfume. Now that I've read the book, I know that there's power to perfume. And I know that I've had experiences in my life that I can point to that specifically are examples of the power of perfume. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com. And it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. So we're back with Sue Phillips, the author of The Power of Perfume. This book is amazing. When I first received it, like I said before the break, when I first received it, I thought, The Power of Perfume? The more I got into the book, the more I understood. Like, I really do have instances. I'm 59 now. I do have instances over the last 59 years where I would smell something and it would bring me back. It would bring me, it's almost like listening to, like, I'm a big fan of classic rock from the 70s, 60s, and 70s, that kind of thing. And it takes me back to my childhood, right? It takes me back to being in Oklahoma and, riding in the back seat of my mother's car and listening to the radio that she played. And, those songs are on that, are part of that. So the same thing though with fragrance. Like, there are, and I was just telling somebody the other day that I have a walk that I do that's a little over 3 miles, and there's a house that I walk past, and they use the same soap. Not joking. They use the same. I mean, weird, right? They use the same soap that this friend of mine uses, and so I was telling them the other day. I'm like, I thought of you the other day on my walk, and they're like, this is kind of weird, right? But it really, it's true. It's absolutely true. It's amazing. Absolutely.
Because there was, I talk about, I do a lot of seminars and events and master classes where I talk about fragrance through the decades.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, if you ask me about a fragrance, I'll tell you what decade it is and what comes to mind.
Right.
In the not that I was around in 1910, but 1910s were the really big, heavy classics. And then 1920 was Chanel. 1930 was this Guerlain, Nuit de Vol. In the 40s, it was starting to become, like the Dior and the big shoulders and the narrow waist. In the 50s, it was Norel and all the designers from France. And then in the 60s, it was now starting to, the American. Remember the fragrance Charlie? You probably don't remember. Mm-hmm. It was a Revlon fragrance, Charlie. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of the wonderful women being liberated and walking down striding the down Fifth Avenue in a pantsuit. Well, women didn't wear pantsuits then, but Charlie, the Revlon girl, wore pantsuit. And this mm-hmm. was her road to liberation and independence. Mm-hmm. And then the 70s was 70s was something else. The 80s was Giorgio, Beverly Hills, the big shoulder pads, this big, huge fragrance. So literally people who wore the fragrances during those different times can remember them just by a sniff, and your entire life will flip before you as you experience that aroma.
It's amazing how it brings the memory back. It's amazing. So I'd like to, if it's okay, go through the book and let's talk about some of these chapters. Okay. I love this book, by the way. So talk about the first chapter is basically a brief history of perfume. We just talked about that basically, right? And
Yes.
and
Yes.
so Egypt started it.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So the reason Egypt started was because it was a time of ceremonial sacrifices to the gods. And the religious ceremonies were very, very important to the community. And they would make sacrifices to the gods, and they would put on an altar of wood all the elements that they wanted to burn as offerings to the gods. It was oud, which is a French word for wood, like sandalwood, all the incense, all the aromas that they had in their community, in their civilization, that they put on an altar wood, and they would burn it. And through the aromas wafting up into the air, it really gave this beautiful aroma, and all the smoke would go up through the air. So it was called perfumum. Through smoke, the aromas would go up through the air. And the word perfume originates from those times when through the smoke would go through the aromas. And it was mostly the ouds, the heavy woodsy fragrance, sandalwood, there's cedar wood, the incense. And that's how they would make sacrifices to the gods. And so that's why fragrance has been around, and Egypt started it all centuries ago, to really, from a religious standpoint, sacrificial standpoint, honor the gods.
Wow. And then the French perfected it.
Yes, but before the French, you had the 13th century that basically they wanted to find a way to make sinners come back to the church to repent. So they would put in a little thurible, one of these sort of caskets, these bowls, and they would put galbanum, which is a very sort of pungent, stringent, kind of a very fresh, green kind of pungent aroma. They would put it into these thuribles, and then they would swing them backwards and forwards. And through the aromas wafting out of these thuribles would come the aroma, and that would be a way for sinners to come back to the church to repent.
So they sent them the.
So it was a way for, you know, that even in the Catholic churches, you wave these thuribles backwards and forwards with the incense, and they would put incense in them with this galbanum fragrance, which is a very green, pungent, kind of refreshing but pungent aroma. And they would, you know, wave them backwards and forwards, and by the incense wafting out of these thurible containers, it would be a way for them to say, sinners, come back to the church to repent. You've been sinning, come back and repent. And that's why they use that in the Catholic churches today, these incense holders backwards and forwards. I don't know if you've seen them, but anyway, that's what they do in the Catholic Church. And yes, the French perfected it. And why did the French perfect it? Because they would go in a little town near Paris, outside of Paris, called Grasse, Grasse. It was a beautiful place, and that was where they would start to take the beautiful petals. It was a very fertile area. They had a lot of cows, they had a lot of animals, and they would obviously have all these beautiful petals and flowers. And what they did with the cattle, they had so much cattle, they had to do something with the animal hides. And so what they did was they took the animal hides and they had to soften it with leather. So the leather and the chemicals to soften it made a very, very pungent smell. Well, in this area of Grasse, they had these beautiful fields of flowers, rose and gardenias. It was just a very fertile area. So beautiful flowers grew there very beautifully. And a way to combat the leather aromas from the chemicals, a whole industry was born. They would take the petals and they would put them on a bed of wax or fat, and the petals the aromas and the actual oils from the petals would seep into the wax or to the hot wax or the fat. And then they would extract the oils from the petals, and that's how they would then counteract the smelly leather notes, and they made scented leather. And Catherine de Medici actually hired a Florentine perfumer, and they made scented gloves. They took the leather gloves, which was so pungent, and they scented it with the beautiful aromas from the petals. And that's where the expression walking hand in glove comes from.
Oh, wow. Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool. That's really cool. I love it. So, fragrance through the decades. We talked about that briefly.
Yes.
But I love what you talked about with the 1980s. The perfumes of the 1980s linger on and on and on.
Well, think about Georgia, if you remember Georgia, Beverly Hills. It was also a time where fashion and fragrance were really sort of, together. The fashions were big shoulder pads, big hairstyles, very flamboyant, very, very out there. And the fragrance was very bold and very recognizable. In fact, one of the archetypal fragrances of the 80s was Georgia Beverly Hills. Do you know that restaurateurs banned women from wearing Georgia Beverly Hills fragrance into their restaurant because they said the fragrance overpowered the food? And so on the menus in the restaurant in Beverly Hills, they would say, "Do not wear Georgia Beverly Hills fragrance." They said they didn't want women to wear it, but it was
Way too
$100
strong.
million.
Yeah.
It was way too strong, but it was the most iconic fragrance of the 80s, and it made a fortune. I know the guys who created it. And it was an amazing fragrance, so recognizable. It had a pineapple floral note. The packaging was yellow and white. It was just a brilliant marketing, brilliant launch, brilliant fragrance, so different. And that's what people want. They want something different. They want something recognizable. And I think when at the height of its sort of notoriety, I think Georgia was ultimately sold for $100 million. And it was sold ultimately to Avon, who bought the fragrance.
Wow. So it's all about the ingredients.
Well, it's about everything. So I always say to my clients and my students, when I teach them and I do these talks, what gets you to the counter is the marketing, it's the packaging, it's the advertising, it's the whole sort of theme of what goes around that fragrance. But what makes you come back is the fragrance itself. So it's a combination. I mean, if I had the most magnificent fragrance in here, which is a magnificent fragrance, but in a brown bottle, would this be appealing to anybody? Probably not. Although there is a company called Le Labo that launched a fragrance with these sort of lab bottles, and they did very. But it's just a whole confluence of everything: the marketing, the advertising, the packaging, the fragrance. It's also obviously all the PR. It's all the influencers. Today, everything is on our phones, digital. Everything is, you can. I actually create fragrances for people, and having never met them, they take my scent quiz and I create a fragrance for them just based on their results of the scent quiz. And so that's a whole nother strategy. But we'll get back to the 80s and the 90s if you want.
Well, I actually wanted to talk about the next chapter. It's perfume is about romance, sex, and sexuality.
And it is, again, when you think about the five senses, our sense of sight, our sight is our strongest. It's what we see, it's what we look at, it's how we connect, it's how we, maybe get attracted to somebody by the way they look, the way they, the whole package. Are they tall? Are they short? Are they, what's their lifestyle? What do they look like? But the most powerful is our sense of smell. And the reason it's our most powerful, it's because it connects memory and emotion. So memory and emotion and scent and taste. It's the only sense that we have that connects all of those other senses. So, you can actually have lost your sight. And what happens is your sense of smell and the other senses start to really accelerate. if you lose your sense of smell, though, your life becomes really very challenging. And I've seen it with people who've lost this sense of smell through COVID. And they have a diminished lifestyle. They're dejected. They're depressed. They don't want to socialize because everything we do about socialization revolves around let's go for lunch, for dinner, for breakfast, for tea, for coffee, for parties, anniversaries. Everything that we do has a food component, and the food also has a scent component. So food and scent, food and aroma. Even in intimate relationships, our sense of smell is very important. It's if you can't smell, you can't taste. I think I told you I had a very attractive sort of connection with somebody before, after I got divorced, and there was always this chemistry and this connection. And when I finally got close, oh man, that was it. Done. I was done because their body aroma was awful, awful.
Yeah, I can certainly understand. And with you, it's got to be pronounced, right? Because your entire life is about scent. Your entire life is about what you call olfactive moments, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So where to wear perfume?
So you wear, as Coco Chanel said, you wear perfume wherever you want to be kissed. So typically in the 18th century and the 17th century, where women wore long skirts, you applied fragrance from the bottom up at the ankle. So those long skirts, the swishing of the long skirts would make the fragrance rise. Today, you don't have to waste your expensive perfume, but typically at the ankles, behind the knees, in between the thighs, in the chest area, at all the pulse points, here and here, and as we say, wherever you want to be kissed. A lot of people just do a spritz here and a spritz here, and who do they want to attract? The birds or the clouds, because fragrance. So I always tell people, obviously if fragrance is expensive and there's no need to wear fragrance at the ankles anymore because, you don't have to. Just at the pulse points. And when you spray fragrance, you just spray it. You never rub it like this because your oils from your own body chemistry will distort the fragrance. So you have to just let it dry, and then at the nape of the neck too.
Wow.
But that's really the way fragrance.
So your personal notes, create your own.
Yes. So at the time going back to my history and so on, in 2008, the economy crashed. And all the consulting that I was doing dried up. So I was consulting for Burberry and Avon and Trish McEvoy and all these brands, and it all dried up. And so I started my own custom fragrance business, which at the time people said, "What are you doing? Tupperware parties for perfume?" And they laughed. And I started from my apartment, and then I found a boutique downtown, which I called the Centarium. And people like Jamie Foxx found me, and Katie Holmes and Zendaya. And everything was going great. And I created all these beautiful fragrances. I actually have my box of fragrances here. It's a little too heavy to lift up, but 18 different fragrances. And people loved the fact that they were able to create their own and express their own personality through fragrance. So when the economy crashed and I did this, everything was going great. And then suddenly the pandemic came in 2020. So everything had to, be reinvented again. And that's when I wrote the book. And what was so interesting was one of the symptoms of COVID was loss of smell. It's a term called anosmia, where you have no sense of smell. And there are variations on the theme. There's parosmia, there's smell distortion, there's where your scent and your taste don't work, and a whole bunch of hyposmia, anosmia, dysphagia, all the sort of symptoms. But I was able to help somebody who had lost her sense of smell for 15 months. And when the book was being published, NBC said, Sue, do you think you can help somebody? I said, I don't know. By this stage, I had worked out a scent journey. And then I called it a scent healing journey to see if I could actually help somebody. And we went through all 18 fragrances. When we got to the 14th, she was sniffing and smelling and sniffing and smelling, couldn't smell anything. When the 14th one came, she said, I smell something. And she started to cry. It was so powerful and it was so emotional. And so that was the start of the next chapter of my life, this whole scent healing journey where people from around the country heard about the situation and that I'd help people, and they found me. And I now create fragrance journeys, scent healing journeys in person and online. I have a scent healing kit that if people can't meet with me either in New York or Florida, wherever, I send it to them. And just last week, I had a woman who had lost her sense of smell, and I was able to help her. So it's taking fragrance to another trajectory in a healing modality, as opposed to just looking good and gorgeous and smelling sexy. And that is the power of perfume. That is the power of perfume, to make people happy, make people confident, make them feeling sensual and sexy, and also helping them regain their lifestyle. Because when you lose your sense of smell, you lose your sense of taste, and your lifestyle becomes diminished.
So are you, when you're helping people smell again or regain their sense of smell, are you introducing scents that they don't normally smell or haven't been able to smell? Like, are you coming
Yes.
at it from a different angle is what I'm asking?
Typically, I'm coming from an angle of, I want you to literally be quiet, focus, literally smell with your brain, focus and concentrate. You know, we have so many distractions in our lives. The noises, the TV, the digital, the phone ringing, the dogs barking, the kids, and people don't concentrate. You know, it's so interesting when you really do shut off the rest of the world and you concentrate and you get the neuro sort of the transmitters going from your sense of your olfactory sense to the limbic system. Those neurotransformers just kick in, and it's literally a pathway from your olfactory to your limbic system to really help people concentrate and smell with their brain. And I've had tremendous success. In some instances, I had not been able to help people who lost their sense of smell, not through COVID or nausea, but through maybe a brain injury. And then they had radiation, and sadly, their brain cells were fried, and so they couldn't do it. They couldn't smell anything because they had that loss of smell. That was done way before COVID.
So can that neurotransmitter sort of breakdown, can that be reconnected? Is that something that can be done?
Well, I have done it. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see that I have a scent video presentation that if people can't meet me in person, they can actually get the kit and they can see it online. Yes, it's really retraining the brain to smell. You know, Mike, nobody has ever been taught to smell. When we are infants, we're born. We recognize our mothers from our olfactory sense. It's very powerful. Babies can actually recognize their mothers, but nobody teaches us. You know, we're taught to talk. We're taught to speak. We're taught to write. We're taught to even listen. We're taught to touch. You know, but nobody teaches us how to smell. It's an automatic response. So when you lose it, it's devastating. People suddenly told me during COVID they couldn't smell coffee, they couldn't smell this, they couldn't smell their lovers, they couldn't smell their babies. They just lost their sense of smell, and it really affected their lifestyle. One client I had, Bobby Fendley, he was amazing. He came from Wisconsin. He had heard about me through the NBC, and he found me and he contacted me. He said, I'd love to come and see you. And when I met with him, he was really dejected. He walked with a bit of a stoop. He was very pale. He had no joy in his face. It took an hour for me to go through the scent healing journey with him. When he left, his face was flushed. It was rosy. His cheeks were rosy. He stood up. He cried. I cried. He was so thrilled. And 2 years later, I interviewed him again for my next book that's coming out. And I spoke to all my clients, and the transformation was amazing. They were able to enjoy life again. They were able to go out. They were able to enjoy life and food and restaurants and experiences and so on.
Do you blindfold them during this process?
Nope. Nope. I don't.
The reason I'm asking is earlier you said if people lose their sense of sight, their sense of smell and taste tends to accentuate.
Yes, it's true. But what I do is for my scent healing kit, I have numbers. So in the scent, I have a blend chart, and I have number one and what's number one, citrus, number two, green, whatever. But during the consultation, I don't want to influence them by saying, number one is a lemon scent. So, oh yeah, I just want them to think blindly and just smell. And so eventually, after we go through the first round, then I say to them, okay, now you can see what's number one, number two, number three, number 80. And then they're able to associate it. But for the initial presentation or the initial consultation, I don't want to influence them by saying, okay, you're going to smell a lemon now. Can you smell a lemon? And basically, they think they smell a lemon, but I just want it to be neutral.
Well, that's where you get rid of the confirmation bias, right? You're literally making this one of those things that's just that's literally organic.
Exactly. Actually, I'll show you. So this is the scent.
I see it, yeah.
So as you see, I can have the numbers here, and on the top I have the chart of what it is. But when we do it, I take off the chart and I don't let them see it. I just let them go through the numbers, and that also forces them to concentrate. Yeah. Focus is one of the most important things that we do when we're doing the scent healing consultations. I don't want to influence them in any which way. I want them to really consider what they're smelling, if they can smell, and if they can smell what it is that they're smelling. If they can't smell, that's fine. So I always say, something that you can smell, put on the left for like. Something that you're not able to recognize as a maybe, put in the middle for maybe. And the things that you cannot, or you don't like, or you can't smell at all, put on the right for reject. And ultimately, we do it once or twice. By the third time, they have more blotter strips. They have more fragrances that they like on the left, because I'm able to help them connect those neural pathways to really think and smell with their brain. It's because people don't even think about it.
Yeah, the brain takes up 5% of the body, of total body weight, but it can take 20% of the energy. So most people don't understand how powerful the brain is until they focus, of course, right?
Yeah.
So creating bespoke fragrances for celebs. Can you talk about that for a second?
So the first
Jamie Foxx. What was that like?
Oh, that was amazing. So I had been downtown. My boutique was downtown in Tribeca, and I called it the Centarium at that time. So I had left. I had a client. I left. I was on the way uptown, right near Bloomingdale's, and I get a phone call saying, we would like to talk to you about a fragrance seminar. I said, okay. They said, well, where are you? I said, where are you? They said, we're on 65th Street. I used to live on 65th Street. So my website had both addresses, the 65th Street and downtown. So I said, well, I just finished, but I'm right near 65th Street. So if you'd like to pick me up, I can take you to my boutique. So I didn't know who these people were. And they kept on talking, well, Foxy would like to make an appointment. I said, okay, who's Foxy? So they picked me up. This big stretch limo shows up near Bloomingdale's. We get in the car, we go downtown. Two lovely women were there talking about Foxy. So finally, I took them through they said, it's for Foxy. He wants to make a fragrance. So Okay, well, all right. So we'll do it with the ladies. And then they told me it was for Jamie Foxx. They said a very big celebrity. I said, okay, great. So then I made the fragrance for them based on what they thought he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting. It was not what they wanted, what they thought he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So that was on a Wednesday or a Thursday. They called me on Friday. They said he would like to come and meet you in person. And he was actually in a show on Broadway at that time. So he came on Sunday morning, and he was just so funny, so wonderful, such a great guy, so filled with humor and humble, but funny, just great. And he told me it was for a lady friend. So now I'm thinking, who's the lady friend? So it's not for him, but he knew what he liked. So now I had to recreate it and sort of come up with some of the elements. And I took him through the fragrance journey. I showed him all 18, and he liked this one and that one and so on. And then so that he never told me who it was for, but he loved the fragrance that we created, and a beautiful bottle and a beautiful package. And then 2 weeks later, I get a call from the two ladies, and they said, an actress wants to come and see you. All the steeped in mystery. And so who shows up? Katie Holmes, who is lovely. She was tall. She was not as funny as he was. He was just, he's got a great sense of humor. He's just a wonderful guy. She was very nice, a little more reserved, but she liked what he had done for her, but she wanted to sort of nuance it a little bit more. And then I said to her, well, why don't we make one for your daughter and one for Jamie? So I then created 2 extra fragrances that she would give to her daughter, Surrey, and one for Jamie, because they were dating.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody really knew at the time. So that was great. Celebrities are just like any of us. They have their likes, their dislikes, but there is an expectation that they want to be treated really well. And of course, I treat every client well. I mean, I don't mind if you're a celebrity or not. You're a client, you come in, you want to create something, and I want to give you a beautiful experience. Then Zendaya came. I got a call from Zendaya's manager that she and her friend wanted to come in. This guy, Darwin or Darlin, I think. They're very good friends. They were both in that movie, The Tennis Player. And she was fantastic. Zendaya, I think she is amazing. So she wanted to create her fragrance. She said, I said, well, what would you like to call it? She said, I think NYC. Then she said, no, NYZ, which I thought was great. And then, and I met Susan Sarandon at the Oscars, Marsha Gay Harden. These Oscars parties, they have all these pre-events and different activities. And when, the companies set them up, and the celebrities come in and try different things. And I don't know if you've ever heard of an actor called Obaba Batunde. He's a wonderful actor. He's in a series called something or other. I've forgotten. But he came, and he just loved the rose floral fragrance. He said, I love rose. I think it's wonderful. And what I loved about that is that truly fragrance ingredients have no gender. It's not that florals are only for women or spices and woodsy are only for men. In fact, the word perfume is not just for women. It's just the aspect of the concentration.
Mm-hmm.
So men can love perfume and women can like colognes. It's just a question of the strength.
Right.
But in America, everybody thinks perfumes are only for women and that florals are only for women, it's wrong. I mean, the Europeans have been wearing fragrance for centuries, and they love florals and they experience florals and they enjoy it. And it's not that anybody has to have, a gender fragrance. There's no such thing as a gender fragrance.
Mm-hmm. So the personality of fragrance.
Yes. What do you mean by the person? Does fragrance create your own personality, or can we reflect your personality through fragrance?
So it's a chapter in your book.
Yes.
And I was a little taken aback by it because I never thought of fragrance as being Right. It just wasn't something that occurred to me. But full disclosure, I've never taken your scent thing either.
Yeah.
So this was a real learning experience in terms of how scent sort of drives us, like how it affects us. And it affects, so fragrance has a connection with your personality. And I didn't realize that until I read your book.
So the personality of fragrance, it can be warm, which could reflect into woodsy and spicy.
Yeah.
It could be bright, which could be citrusy and lemon and very zesty and very exuberant. It could be very romantic, which you could construe as florals and very, pretty sophisticated flower. It could be very energetic,
Mm-hmm.
which could be something that you would go for a walk. And so it's very interesting. And the scent quiz that I created really helps people determine their scent or olfactive personality.
Yeah.
If, for instance, if you walk down the street and you smell something on someone and you say, "Oh my God, that smells fabulous. What are you wearing?"
Right.
And they say it's XYZ. And then you go and buy the XYZ fragrance and it doesn't smell anything like it on you. Because we all have our own body chemistry, we all have our own DNA. Exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
Even people talk about pheromones. Well, pheromones are something that really animals have. You see animals sniffing each other. That's because they want to get into. We don't sniff each other that way. And there's a whole bone of contention. Do human beings have pheromones, or is it just an animalic thing? It's mostly for animals, but but your own body odor can be affected by the foods you eat and by the lifestyle. Obviously I'm not talking about soap and water. We hope everybody uses soap and water, but sometimes your own body oils can be a turn on or a turn off.
Mm-hmm.
But the best thing is that when you wear a fragrance that really reflects your individuality and your personality, and then it becomes you, that fragrance personality can be the most wonderful thing. When people compliment you, how do you feel? And they say, "Oh, Mike, you smell amazing." You'll feel happy, you'll feel uplifted, you'll feel confident, you'll walk a little taller, you'll smile a little bit more broadly. It gives you confidence. The best, honestly, the best compliment we can ever really receive is, "Wow, you smell amazing."
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get that, maybe change your fragrance. Buy one from me.
I've actually heard it before, believe it or not. And years ago, I had this sort of, I wasn't wearing any sort of cologne or anything, right? And my daughter approached me, and she was going to fit him at the time, right?
Yes.
And she said, "Dad, I'd like to buy you a cologne. Is there one you like?" And I said, "Not really." Right. I said, "Tell you what I'll do. There's a sample pack that has, like, I don't know, 30 little samples in it." I said, "Buy me that, and I'll try each one, and then I'll narrow it down." Right.
Yeah.
So I narrowed it down. I came up with 3. And so she ended up buying me one. I bought the other 2. Right. And so I didn't want to wear the same thing all the time. Right. I wanted something different. So I had 3 different fragrances that I picked, and I started wearing them, mostly because she brought it up. Right. And people would tell me all the time, "My gosh, you smell amazing," right? So it was really something that, and it did something for me. And the whole book brought all that back, because I started thinking about how I felt right. And I started picking certain colognes depending
Right.
upon the kind of day I was expecting, or the kind of,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? It was interesting. So I found it fascinating. And Versace was one of them, by the way. Versace for men was one of them. Dolce & Gabbana was another one. And I forget the third one, but I still have some Dolce & Gabbana left over. But
So that tells me immediately that you like fresh and clean fragrances.
yeah. So Versace by far was my favorite.
Yeah.
And I actually would still have it, except somebody stole my bag out of my truck and it was in it. So I need to get it replaced. So it's one of the things I've actually obviously been thinking about. So, so the last chapter in your book talks about ambient scenting and sensory experiences. Talk about that for a second. I mean, I know we've touched on it a little bit, but.
So one of the things that really resonates with people is if you go into a store or if you go into a place where a retail store, and it's a beautiful store, and there's a lovely fragrance that is in the air, not too strong, but just a very lovely fragrance. It really brings the experience together. It's a multi-sensory experience. We call it sort of ambient scenting or scenting, environmental scenting. This is something that many, many hotels and spas and casinos, particularly in Las Vegas and around the world, have used because they realize that a beautiful fragrance in a location helps to create a positive environment and a positive experience. And I'm not talking about, well, you go into a restaurant, the smell of food can be very enticing and could be wonderful, smell of steak or whatever, cooking is great. But in the sort of front lobby area, if there's a wonderful aroma, it entices you. It makes you feel, this is a great place. It's got a nice ambiance. So a lot of hotels, spas, casinos, and, conferences use ambient scenting to create that multi-sensory experience. The reason it started, in fact, in America, in Las Vegas, many of the hotels and the casinos, they were smoking. And so as a way to counteract the smoke odors, they used the
HVAC, yeah.
HVAC system to clear the air. And they put, in fact, I worked for a company, this guy, Mike, was very instrumental in creating this whole situation in the early 70s in America. And he went to the spas and they wanted to counteract the smoke odors. So he put in the air vents, the HVAC system, a sort of citrusy lemon fragrance, and it diffused in the casino. So number one, it got rid of the smoke odors. It gave a very lovely, refreshing scent. And then some people realized that that could be a great way to brand the property. So if you go to, Bellagio, MGM Grand, or Wynn, or any of these hotels in Las Vegas and casinos around the world, there is a fragrance that is diffusing out of the HVAC system, and it becomes synonymous with the brand. So you can actually smell something and then say, I love that so much. And maybe at the store downstairs, they would have the candles or a spray so that you can recreate that. But I often will go into a store and it could be absolutely beautiful. And when there is no fragrance, I think there's a disconnect. I would love to smell something that reflects the image and the branding of the store, whether it be a retail store or a conference room or whatever, in a beautiful store, just because it's a great experience. And again, scent is our most powerful. When you create and you have a fragrance that reflects your brand or your image, it's a beautiful, complete package. And it makes people feel good.
So I'm reading your book and it's reminding me of all kinds of things. One in particular, I've been in real estate for 33 plus years.
Yes.
I'm now an adjunct instructor at a local college teaching real estate, right? And I'm actually working on my education currently, and I'm going to be taking a full-time position at the college.
Right.
So what I found fascinating is one of the things that we do with our clients is when we're looking at an open house opportunity, for instance, right? One of the things we'll do is we'll talk with them about the scent that's available in their home. We'll also talk with them about what we do with the lights. So we turn all the lights on.
Right.
Another thing we do is we have music playing, and it's usually nondescript. It's just something that's, like a light jazz, that kind of thing. but it changes the ambiance. It changes how people feel when they're
Right.
walking through that property. And if you look at new home communities and their model home complexes, that's one of the things that you'll find. You'll find scent, you'll find music, you'll
And light.
find lighting, you'll find all of these things that are sort of this multi-sensory experience, much
Exactly.
like what you created when you were traveling across the country for 2 years,
Right.
right?
Well, that's a great thing because, for real estate agents and trying to sell a home, you want to create that lovely experience. And so many real estate companies either will buy a candle and they'll create it to reflect a nice feeling, or you can get a room spray, which, you can buy, or I will create. But yes, having that feeling of walking into a home or walking into an apartment and there's a lovely aroma is such a game changer. I just moved to Sarasota a few weeks ago. And before I came down here, I was looking for different places and I saw a few which were just beautiful. But I walked in and there was either there was no fragrance or really bad kind of not a wonderful scent. And I said, that's it, I'm done. I can't do it. So it's very interesting that you've picked that up and that you're promulgating for that, because it's a very beautiful situation to experience a positive scent experience and a positive, multi-sensory experience. Music, the music and the scent and the lighting is all pivotal. Companies do this all the time, especially in places like Florida and places in around the country where a certain mood is wanting to be reflected. So you wouldn't have, say, in a very staid English, say, castle, a very bright citrusy fragrance that would be better for a Florida home or Miami Beach or Palm Beach, whereas something very sophisticated and maybe slightly sandalwood and maybe something a little bit more quote unisex would be better than a typical very big floral. I stay away from certain key ingredients that may reflect a floral, a feminine theme or a masculine theme. It's better to be neutral. And so what's very interesting, I realized through research, the Americans love fresh and clean. Everyone wants to be fresh and clean. We want to deodorize ourselves. We want to be fresh and clean. Everybody hates the idea of bad body odor. So fresh and clean is for Americans. The Europeans love florals. The South Americans like spicy. The English like lavender. And the Moroccans the Middle East love oud and incense. Interestingly enough, the Asians, particularly the Japanese, love to give fragrance as gifts, but they don't wear fragrance. So it's fascinating how different cultures also express their olfactive preferences through fragrances.
Yeah, it really is. The name of the book is The Power of Perfume, and it's amazing, absolutely amazing. I learned so much, and I'm so thankful that you were our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I can't thank you enough. So people can get the book at Amazon. I know that.
Yes.
How can they reach out to you? What website do you have where they can go and take these scent tests?
Yes, it's SuePhillips.com, and it's with 2 L's, SuePhillips.com, 2 L's. And they can take the scent quiz. Just scroll down, take the scent quiz. I'd be delighted to hear from people. I'm on Instagram. I have 4 Instagrams: Scentfully Sue, The Real Sue Phillips, Sue Phillips Fragrance, and Scenterprises. There's a reason I have so many, but if you Google me, you'll find them. And I'm also about ready to publish my second book, which is all about how I've helped people regain their sense of smell from COVID and nausea. And that'll be another, I think, really interesting book to hear how people's experiences regaining their sense of smell was just a game changer for them.
I can't wait to have you back to go over that book. This is going to be awesome. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. Take care. Warmest wishes, and stay well, stay fragrant, and stay fabulously well. I'm happy to see you. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.